Today, we're going to dive into how things can look different for the Minnesota Vikings offense, especially on the ground. Dalvin Cook being healthy, I think, is one of the things that this team is going to need in order to ensure the highest amount of success. And I do think that an improvement in the running game is something that really can help take them and Kirk Cousins to the next level. I'm also really curious about how Gary Kubiak's influence on this offense will help to change that for the better, because Chad, I really think that that's something that didn't go quite as well as planned last year.
Well, and it's so fascinating, too, because Dalvin Cook is just such an interesting player with where he is at in his career, where he shows up. And I think he has even said those first 3 games of his rookie season even took him by surprise. Everything went better than he expected. He basically was told over and over, the NFL is going to be harder than you think. This is a no-joke league. You're not going to be able to just jump right in and do what you did in college. And then he jumped right in and did what he did in college. So, of course, everything, was going great up until that ACL injury. And then last season, as he was hoping to build off of those first 3 games as a rookie, he deals with a nagging hamstring injury that, he suffered in the second game of the season, that game at Lambeau, and sort of, wasn't the same after that. So there's a lot that we can get into with how the running game will do better. But I think, of course, it has to start with Dalvin Cook and, of course, him being healthy.
And him coming into the league and not having the expectation for it to be as easy as it was in college, that's understandable, because for like 99% of guys that go from playing wherever you played in college, I don't care if it's in the ACC at Florida State, in the Big Ten at Ohio State, out in the Pac-12, wherever, it doesn't matter. The NFL is tougher. So I understand that, like, being a qualification and then being a little bit surprised. Oh, this isn't quite that hard. But the injuries that's something that I always come back to when I think about Dalvin Cook, because there's no questioning that he's a superior talent. The dude's a freak athlete. Like, there's no other way to put it. He is incredibly talented. He's athletic. He's everything that you want in a running back, except for the durability, and that matters. The ACL is a bit of a freak thing, but the hamstring and that continuing to pop up, those things do really, really worry me.
Yeah, and I wonder with him too is how are they going to manage his workload? Because I'm not sure about what they have behind him. I know they went and got Alex Madison from Boise State in the draft, but how much can you really expect out of a rookie running back that's not, the caliber of a Dalvin Cook to step in and contribute right away, especially if they're hoping that he picks up some of the slack that Latavius Murray left behind. And then, what do they have as far as depth is concerned beyond that as well? If Dalvin Cook gets injured, if he has to miss a couple of games, can Alex Madison just step in and fill those shoes?
That's a great question.
I have my doubts about that. So it's going to be really important for Dalvin Cook to stay healthy. And I'm also very curious as to how exactly they're going to be able to use him too as well.
Chad, let me ask you this. What's plan B if he doesn't stay healthy? Because like Manny brought up, Latavius Murray's not here anymore. He was a very serviceable backup, and really someone that's not going to get a ton of credit when things go well. He's just going to kind of fly under the radar, but he's someone that they're going to miss. So where do they go if Dalvin Cook finds himself in a similar situation to what his past has been so far?
Well, so largely the Vikings had a pretty good draft. They were able to get the interior offensive lineman that they wanted. They were able to get Kyle Rudolph's eventual successor and a guy that they can use in 2 tight end sets. They were able to get a guard in the 4th round. They did a lot of good things in the draft. The one thing that they did not do well was draft a running back in the 3rd round. It is one thing to draft a running back in the 3rd round who you think, like a David Montgomery, who ended up going in the division to the Chicago Bears and has been one of the standouts through their mini camps and OTAs. It's one thing to go get a guy like that who can be a 3-down back who, if something happens to Dalvin Cook, you can hand the ball to 15, 20 times a game and can be serviceable. The Vikings did not do that, though. They went out and got a short yardage guy. They loved Latavius Murray in the short yardage, but of course, we're not going to be able to afford to bring him back. So they go get a short yardage guy, which is fine and all if you've already got the guy who can, handle the ball 15 times a game if Dalvin Cook gets hurt. But they don't have a good option right now for if Dalvin Cook gets hurt. And maybe he won't get hurt and everything will work out just fine. But this is 2 seasons now that Dalvin Cook has had to miss some games. And if something happens to him, I'm not confident in what the Vikings have behind him.
Yeah, how scary is that? Just to think about. If you're a Vikings fan out there and there's really not a great option behind Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook has not proven that he can stay on the field for 16 games and handle the ball 20 times a game, that's a scary thing, right, Manny?
Yeah, well, and the other part of this too is if you're Gary Kubiak, how are you feeling about the depth at that position that you have? Because now maybe if you're Kubiak, you can look at your system and say, look, between Denver and Houston, we plugged in a lot of guys that could just, guys, quote unquote, that we picked up off the street, and
Sure.
they plugged in and we plugged them in. They were productive. But I don't know how much you can really rely on that, especially when you have a player like Dalvin Cook that is as dynamic as he is. I mean, because I think it's a significant drop off from him and the guys behind him.
And you said picked up off the street, and that will never not be like a funny football saying to me, like, oh, they just got a running back off the street, as if he's not in world-class shape and a better athlete than 99.9% of humans on the earth. Oh, they just picked up some dude off the street to come play this week. That'll never not be funny.
Mike Boone has muscles coming out of, places I didn't even know could have muscles, but he's the guy that they just picked up off the street.
Yeah, exactly. They just picked up a kicker off the street. No one else in the world can do that. They found him on the street. Okay. That's who you found on the street. I'll believe that. That's a hilarious saying to me. And I'm also curious. You brought up Gary Kubiak, Manny. How is his influence on this offense going to change the running game? Do we know if it's going to look any different than what it has in the past? And more importantly, because everything that we talk about offensively, whether it's Laquan Treadwell not being able to catch passes, or Stephon Diggs getting open, or Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith and the offensive line and Dalvin Cook and all of that, there's one common denominator that it all gets back to, and that's Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, one, how is Gary Kubiak's influence going to help this offense in terms of how they run the ball? And two, how's that going to help Kirk Cousins be a better quarterback than he was in 2018?
To me, it starts with the play action, right? I mean, Kirk Cousins historically throughout his career has always been his strength. The most success he's had has always been in the play action. And if you're in a system like what Gary Kubiak has, you're going to be running a lot of play action. So I think on the surface, that seems like the right course of action to try and maximize what you have out of Kirk Cousins. I mean, whatever John DeFilippo was trying to do last year, it was just not a good fit for Kirk Cousins. And that's not letting Kirk off the hook by any stretch of the imagination. But
I refuse for that to happen.
And certainly Matthew Collar, the normal host of this show, would refuse.
I have to do my best Matthew Collar impersonation when I'm sitting in this chair. Like I'm gonna have to.
I'm excited. Does this mean you're gonna be banging the glass pretty soon and standing up?
I'm gonna have to just yell football when we go to break, and I'm just going to have to do all of these things if I'm going to try and fill the shoes of Matthew Collar today for at least the first hour of the show. So I don't know, but continue on.
But we've mentioned this before on this show, and Collar's harped on this a lot too, is when you look back at the best season of Kirk Cousins' career, it was in Washington. And part of that was, you had Sean McVay on that staff, you had Kyle Shanahan on that staff, and they were running a system that was beneficial for Kirk Cousins' skill set. And I think it's a very similar system to what Gary Kubiak wants to run here. So that can help Kirk Cousins, but I think still at the end of the day, it's going to come down to his ability to be able to execute on third downs. If it's 3rd and 11, if you hand the ball off to Dalvin Cook and he gets stuffed for a yard or two, and then you throw an incomplete pass on 2nd down or vice versa, if it's 3rd and 11, can Kirk Cousins make enough throws to keep drives going, keep the chains moving, and make this offense more efficient than what it was last year?
And I think that the other part that can help make it more efficient last year is actually utilizing the running backs.
Yep.
For all of the lack of depth that we have already discussed, one thing that the Vikings did not do well last year that I do think they'll be better at this year with Gary Kubiak is throwing them the ball. There's more that you can do to get Dalvin Cook the ball, which they continue to say is a main priority beyond just halfback dive. You can call screens for this guy.
Run power.
He's shown that he can actually catch the ball and handle it. And if your goal is to get the ball in Dalvin Cook's hands in space, you can do that. You also, for all of the lack of depth at running back that we've talked about, Mike Boone, one of your backups, used to be a wide receiver. Amir Abdullah, one of your backups, is a great punt returner, kick returner, can handle the ball in space and out of the backfield. And so I do think one of the ways that they can avoid putting Kirk Cousins in 3rd and 11, where he tends to make too many mistakes, is staying ahead of the change by getting the running backs more involved.
Yeah, that's obviously the key to the game. No, and we harp on Kirk Cousins for a lot of things, and a lot of it's deserved, but not many quarterbacks are very successful in 3rd and 11 more times than not. Like, that's just how football works, right? It's
fair.
You can't expect someone to continue to find success on 3rd and 11 over and over and over again. And you bring up different ways of getting the running backs involved, and that's something that really entices me, as long as Kirk Cousins isn't throwing backwards passes to them like we saw at one point last year. that's something that does entice me, but it also makes me wonder, is that setting up Dalvin Cook for a potential putting him in a bad position in terms of keeping his body healthy? Is that a bit of a question mark there?
I think even just the durability concerns and the workload is fair. If you go back to his rookie season, his third game, he had 27 carries. His third game of his entire NFL career. His first game, he had 22. So last year,
welcome to the league, man.
Right, because of the injury last year, he didn't necessarily have that. But I think a lot of the reason that he didn't have to carry it 22 times last year was because they had Latavius Murray and trusted him and were confident in him. But the depth issues, I think, go beyond running back as well. For all of the improvements that the Vikings have made offensively, and I think a large chunk of that is due to the coaching staff. John DeFilippo was the wrong fit from the very start with this offense.
Sure.
So I think that there are improvements there, but also there are improvements on the offensive line with Garrett Bradbury and the interior part of the offensive line, presumably at least taking a small step forward. Granted, it's a low bar to clear to take that step forward, but
still a step.
Still
counts.
So for all the progress that they've made, though, this is still an offense that is going to rely on their starters.